Hey, thanks for having me on your Analog Joe thing the other day. That was a lot of fun.
That was fun. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. I wasn't sure how. So we had Mike on the very first interview show on analogjoe.com, and it went really well. It went so well that we ended up doing a pin tour for about 40 minutes afterwards.
It's true.
So it was fun. It was fun.
And only a small diversion into Rome research.
Yep. Yep. I have been very particular about not diving into Rome research on any of the Analog Joe webinars, but Mike made sure we broke that fast.
It's true. I also got you a bell. Want to give it
Yes.
a ding? There we go. So
Got it.
somebody was joking around in the chat couple episodes ago that there should be a ding every time that I mention Rome research. So there it is. I got Joe a bell.
Nailed it. I gotta like tune my ears to catch it now. 'Cause usually it's like, oh, he said it again. Oh, he said it again. But now I can.
Yep. I'm gonna try and
I gotta
not
stop now.
not go there. But yeah, that was a lot of fun to do, and I hope that the people found it entertaining and useful. I'm always skeptical that what I'm actually doing is interesting to anybody, but
All right. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was
Cool.
super helpful, and based on the emails I got about it, I think other people did too. So
awesome.
well done, sir.
So we'll put a link to that in the show notes, and if you are interested in the analog stuff, go check out analogjoe.com.
It was fun. Yeah, it's a cool site, but I'm biased.
Side note, Analog Joe, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe that was a byproduct of Bookworm, where I kept calling you Analog Joe,
Yes.
and then sent you the domain that was available and said, you better buy this.
Yep.
Even before you had an idea for what you were going to turn it into.
Correct. I owned analogjoe.com for about 6 months before I did anything with it. So
And it is my
I
fault.
think I should own this, but I don't know what to do with it. I actually now have a couple other domains that are similar in that vein that I've learned are like thisjoe.com, and I now own them.
Nice.
So thanks for that. You cost me more than one domain.
Mwahaha. All right, let's jump into follow-up here. We each have a couple of action items. You want to go first?
Sure. So I had two. The first of which is no phones at the dinner table. I've been pretty successful with that, mostly because I told my wife about it. So telling her about it meant that she now holds me accountable to it, and our youngest daughter likes to hold me accountable to it as well. So it works. So that one's been successful so far. That was the first one. The second one is starting to basically label the type of communication that I'm doing very pointedly, as opposed to just saying, I talked to Steve about X, Y, and Z. Like, well, no, I texted Steve about that, or I called Steve about that, or I saw Steve the other day and we talked about, like, I'm trying to be particular and intentional with the way that I use those terms, because in the past I've just said, hey, I talked to Mike about Rome research, and do I get to do it if I do it? Is that how that works?
You do whatever you want. You're the one with the bell.
So I don't want to just say I talked all the time. I want to be more intentional with the way that I use those terms. And I feel like I've been pretty good at those. I have slipped up a few times, but I feel like that's going to take time. So making progress.
So earlier today, when we were texting, we were not talking. This is the first time we have talked
true.
today.
It's true. We were texting earlier. Did I say talked? We talked earlier? I don't
No,
know.
no, I
Maybe
just use that as an example because I think that's a
Yeah.
cool distinction, and I support you in this action item.
Hopefully I nail it. It'll
I'm
take
Mike
time.
Schmitz. I approve this action item for Joe.
All right. Those are my two. What do you got?
All right. I also had no phones at meals, which surprisingly, like after I put this on there, I always thought that I never really did this. And then I caught myself. And I'm like, what is my deal? But this has been successful. We've eliminated it now. And also we've had discussion about it because for my kids, it wasn't the phones, although obviously it would turn into that at some point. Joshua specifically, he's been going through all these like Snoopy comic books and he likes reading them and he'll read for hours. So he'll bring the book to the table and just like not look up from the book the entire time that we're eating. So
Sure.
we've kind of said, you know, phones are going away. Everything else is going away. dinner time is when we eat together and we talk together, because that's the whole point, is having the space for that conversation. So I think this has been successful. And this is the perfect kind of action item, in my opinion, from Bookworm, because it's the kind of thing where just the awareness brings the desired result. There wasn't a whole lot of effort required to do something with this, but
Sure.
it's a win. And then no internet searches and conversations. This was totally on me, letting my kids trap me into this by like, hey, you should look this up. And I am proud to say that this has not happened. Basically, As soon as I put this on the list, I kind of resolved in my head, like, okay, I said I was going to do this. Now I have to do this. And so a couple times they're like, hey, why don't you? And I'm like, no, not doing that.
I'm bad at this one. I feel like I should probably do this one as well. There are so many times like, hey, what's the weather going to be tomorrow?
Sure. Yep.
You pull out the phone and go check it quick.
Yep. Does happen. All right. So that is follow-up. I think we are ready for today's book.
It's time.
It is time. This is the Crossroads of Should and Must by Elle. And this is a very different type of book for Bookworm. It is significantly shorter than many of the books that we have read. I'm looking at you, Principles, Paid to Think,
Yep.
Reclaiming Conversation,
Yep.
etc. It's got a really cool visual style. So a little bit of background here. Elle is a designer / artist who, when she wrote this anyways, was living in San Francisco. And part of her story was she bought this apartment. She had this dream basically of this apartment. And then she's like, I'm going to go see if I can find this apartment from my dream, and found this thing, bought it. And now, like, based on some of the pictures in there, it looks like it's this, got really tall ceilings, and she uses it to paint. And she's got a very distinct style. It's not like purely abstract like a Pablo Picasso. She references Pablo Picasso in here regarding the work. But I don't know. I thought it was, I really like her style, to be honest. Like, it's very colorful. And so there's a lot of the design of the book is obviously her art to support the points that she's making. It's not like the graphs and the 4-square grid that you'll find in every other productivity book. But there are a lot of things in here that she's got a visual that really helps solidify things. What was your take on the I don't want to say the style, because we'll get into the style and rating at the end, but like, you pick this up, it's very different. It's got like, it's a hardcover, quote unquote, but it's got like a cardboard cover at the top.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you open it up and you're like, right away, you're like, whoa, this looks kind of cool. That was my impression. So what did you think?
So for those who can see us in video, this is like one of the pages. I mean, there's a lot of this. I mean, you can kind of see that. But the thing with this is that it's... I had two reactions to this. One was, hey, that's really cool. And two was, that seems kind of cheap. Like the way that they bound it and such, like it would be a very cheap way to do it. But sometimes that doesn't mean it's less impactful. Sometimes that means it's a lot better because they just did something that wasn't normal. And I wondered if that was to follow her thinking behind should and must. Like, I must do it this way. I wondered if it was down that road versus you should go through a design process and get the designer and have the dust cover and all that stuff. Like, this is just completely different than that. I can't say there are a lot of those that I have had that reaction to. Like, the bullet journal was similar. Like, it had a traditional, but it had a very specific style to it. So this one's similar to that. I prefer the bullet journal, like, touch and feel to this one. But it is interesting nonetheless, for sure. It makes it very fast to read. I think I read it in 2 sittings, and they were not long sittings. So, yeah, it's quick. It's quick.
So regarding the binding, I agree with you that the cardboard maybe makes it feel a little bit cheap. I was curious, what you were going to think of that, though, because the paper is another story, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I don't think you maybe have gone quite as far down the paper rabbit hole as I have when it comes to the analog pens and things.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that the paper that I chose for my crazy journal that we unpacked in the Analog Joe recording is that it feels very much like this paper, where it is thicker, and it's not just thicker, it has a little bit different texture. It feels like a little bit shinier almost. And that, I think, really makes the colors pop. So one of the things I noticed when I started using the paper, which I just bought it because it was available, but after the fact, Brad Dowdy told me, like, this is really, really great paper. And Jeff Abbott's like, this is like top of the line paper for what you're going to be doing. It's
sure.
Clairefontaine Triumph, Triumph. And when I first started using it, I recognized that the ink didn't dry as fast as on like a Rhodia web pad, and it didn't quite feel as smooth as the Rhodia web pad. And it took a little bit longer to dry, but once it dried, I noticed that my colors really popped. And so there are certain paper types that you automatically associate them with a specific type of book almost. Like a Bible, for example, typically has like really thin pages. Turning pages in a Bible has a very distinct sound.
Yeah.
Likewise, a lot of the books that we read, even the bullet journal, those types of pages feel a little bit more like the Rhodia web pad sort of thing, in my opinion. And then when I picked up this, the cardboard cover is like, what's going on here? But the pages themselves, I was like, this feels and looks really great. And I don't know specifically what kind of paper she used for this, but because there's a lot of art in this book, that was something I noticed, is that a lot of it looked like it really popped, and maybe that was because of the type of paper that they chose for this.
Yeah, I noticed that it was smoother as I was flipping pages, and they're thicker. They have a little bit heavier weight to them. So I did notice those things, but it wasn't so far into the forefront of my mind that I would call them out as I was talking about the book. So,
and it sounds kind of weird even talking about this at the beginning before we get into the content, but once you've read the book, you kind of get it, because it is so visual. Yeah. It's 130 something pages, but it's probably more like 30 if it was just the written text.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know that it would be that long. 155.
It's almost, okay. Yeah. It's almost an essay.
Well, it started as a Medium post.
Yeah, I noticed that after I got it. And, I picked this book simply because I have heard people who I look up to really rave about this book. One specifically, right before we recorded Bookworm last time, is Sean Blanc. He had a whole newsletter about this phrase from the book, and I don't even remember specifically what the book was, but it's like, oh yeah, there's that book again. I should probably look into that. And then I'll just bring Joe along for the ride.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate that one. I just got thrown in the mix. I see how it is.
Yeah. That does happen, but it happens both ways.
Yep, it definitely does. I definitely throw
Zen in the art of motorcycle maintenance.
Yeah. So true. Apologies.
That's all right. So there's 4 parts to this book. And this discussion is probably going to be a little bit different because we're not going to be rehashing the points of the book. Really, the value of this book, I think, is in the questions that it makes you answer. It's not a book of answers, which is what a lot of productivity books try to be. 3 simple steps to reclaiming 5 hours per day for the rest of your life.
Yep.
It's definitely not that at all. It's part her story, part some exercises that she gives you to go through, and maybe we'll, depending on how this goes, maybe we'll go through one of those on the air here, because I think those are kind of interesting. But real briefly here, before we jump into the content, there's 4 parts to this. Part 1 is titled The Crossroads. Part 2 is The Origin of Should. Part 3 is Must. And part 4 is The Return. So let's start here with part 1, Crossroads. And the first thing I want to unpack here is this job versus career versus calling that she talks about. Now, what was your opinion on how she defined these?
How she defined them? I don't know that I had.
Or what was your reaction to the like? This kind of lays the framework for the rest of the book. So when she was talking about this, as a job is something that's typically done from 9 to 5 for pay. A career is a system of advancements and promotions over time where rewards are used to optimize behavior. A calling is something we feel compelled to do regardless of fame or fortune. The work is the reward.
Right.
So you kind of read those, and when I read it, I kind of like, okay, I kind of think I know where you're going to go with this. And that I think could cause a couple different reactions in people. So I'm curious,
Right.
what was yours?
Yeah. So this is the part. So at one point, Mike texted me and said, "Hey, how far are you into the book? Have you started it?" And he had an action item he wanted to give me. It's like this list that we might go through here. It just kind of depends on how we go here. And at that particular point, I was 30-ish pages into it, where she's defining this job, career, calling, and explaining maybe the differences between should and must. Like, she's getting into that at the very beginning. Sometimes whenever I have a book like this, I'll read it out loud to my wife. Like, she'll be working on dinner and I need to start the book. So I'll go grab it, sit in the kitchen and read it to her. And whenever I did that, I got to about page 30 and she said, "You need to stop. This thing is bad. Like, this is really bad. Do you have to finish reading this?" It's like, well, yeah, I kind of need to finish reading this for Bookworm. I was like, I kind of had similar reactions to it, in that when you look at job, career, calling, she explains it in such a way as if this is supposed to be some revolutionary concept. And maybe it was just my upbringing and my wife's upbringing, but those are terms and delineations that I've heard since I was 10. Like, this is not a new thing at all. And I wondered if maybe that's the Christian religious circles, because like we talk about a calling versus a job all the time. Like, that is not a new thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know that, like, me personally, I felt like she was saying you need to decide which of these systems you're going to fall into. But I think that's false, because I think you can have all three and they can all three be different. So coming from that background, I now have this kind of flawed, crumbling foundation behind the whole book, which is difficult for me to come to grips with. There's also, I'll say this, I'll quit on my rant, but there's a section towards the very beginning where she's talking about, or she has some quotes and references Bill Moyer and Joseph Campbell in the book, The Power of Myth. I've read The Power of Myth. As a Christian, I have very strong opinions against that book, and I am grateful for having read it, but I will not recommend that to anyone who's not on solid standing. So, all of that said, she started off on very rocky footing with me, and she had a very long ways to go to win me back over.
All right, fair enough. I didn't know who those people were.
Okay,
I think I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting to me that the beginning of this book caused, or maybe you had the same reaction when you read The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. But I mean, like, that's exactly what happened with me when I started reading that. But I didn't get that reaction when I read this.
Sure.
Now, regarding the job, career, calling thing, I think this maybe was revelatory to her, but I don't think she tried to take ownership of that idea. She mentions that she heard about it from a TED Talk by Stefan Sagmeister, which I did not watch that TED Talk. But
I didn't either. Yeah, I probably should have, but I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't either. So but the job, career, calling thing, I think this has a lot to do with the perspective of the work that you're doing, not the actual work that you are doing. So one of my favorite stories, fables, whatever, is about these three bricklayers. And I don't remember exactly where I heard this first, but the story goes that there's these three guys who are laying bricks, and there's a tourist that walks up to the first one, and he's like, "Excuse me, sir, what are you doing?" And he's like, "What does it look like I'm doing? I'm laying bricks." He's like not wanting to be there at all. He's just there to collect the paycheck, and that would be, in her definition, a job. Okay, and then he goes up to the second guy and he's like, "Excuse me, sir, what are you doing?" And he's like, "I am building a wall." So he's got a little bit bigger vision. He's not just laying the bricks. It's part of building something bigger, but he still doesn't understand the totality of what he's doing and what purpose it has. For him, it's still just, this is a bigger project, but it's simply that, and my identity value is not derived from the work that I'm doing. But I've done this all my life. I'm good at it. So I am a bricklayer. I have a career.
Yes.
And then the third person, excuse me, sir, what are you doing? He's like, I am building a great cathedral to my God. And he's all excited about the work that he's doing because he sees this as his life's work. All three guys doing the exact same thing, but their perspective on their work is different. And that one is the one that I would argue, it's a calling. Now, this is, I kind of went into this knowing that like I was going to disagree with some of this stuff regarding passion, because in my book, I wrote that the root word for passion is the Latin word pati. It literally means to suffer. So when most people say, follow your passion, man, like right away, I've got a knee-jerk reaction. Like, no, absolutely do not do that. Because it doesn't mean what you think it means. It's not,
right,
I really like doing this, so I'm just going to do it over and over again, and people are going to give me money because the universe owes me. Right? And what was it? Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy, he spoke at some school graduation one time, and he said, essentially, follow your passion is terrible advice. Don't follow it, but always bring it with you. And I never really got into that show. I watched it occasionally, but I remember being struck by how he could go do all this stuff that I absolutely did not want to do ever. And he's like getting all into it. And I'm like, how does he do that? And I think a lot of this is simply he learned to engage his passion that way, and it's all based on his perspective. So I didn't get a chance to talk to Elle Luna. I don't know if she thinks that this is perspective based or if there really is like a specific thing out there that you're going to find it and the stars are going to align, new agey style, and point you in the right direction. I have no idea. But I kind of think maybe it doesn't really matter either.
Yeah.
I don't know. That could be me, though, just because I've got some additional context with this specific subject and I care deeply about it. So
yeah. But see, here's the other thing, too. Should and must. She goes into the definitions and how one is different than the other. But depending on how you look at it, I feel like your perspective could switch one to the other. That's the problem with the explanation, like what you're talking about. And this is why I struggled with the book. I'm not saying that. Like, I just want to be clear here. Like, the book can cause you to ask some good questions. I think it's very valid in that. And there are some questions that she poses. Like, that's one of the things she mentions at the beginning. Is like, I'm simply going to ask the questions that I worked through to help me come up with my own answers. And I think those questions are solid. How she got there and, like, her purpose of what she's trying to get you to do, like, the differences between these two sides, I didn't start off on very good footing with it, and I felt like some of the shoulds that we wrote down, like I could easily say those are musts as well. Like,
yeah,
and depending on how you word a should, like it is a must, or vice versa. Like it just kind of depends on how you see it. So it could be very easy for me to say, yeah, I should go do my job every day. But that's actually a must as well. So like, it depends on how you see it. So that's what I struggled with. Again, I don't think the book itself has a complete flaw to it. I just struggled to understand some of the definitions and how she got there.
Sure. Let me ask you at this point, putting you on the spot.
Go for it. I'm usually pretty good at those.
How would you define your current work, and work being all the things that you do? Do you view it as a job, a career, or a calling? And I know those can change, but like primarily, what's your attitude towards those?
It's kind of a mix between career and calling. So, and I say that because I feel like I need to. So, for those who don't know, I'm an IT director at a church, but I also have Bookworm. I also have my own personal brand, which is YouTube, Twitch, and things. And there are a couple other small things like side gigs, freelance things I do for like web development and such. All of those have one thing in common, which is I help other people with technology in some form, which I would say is my calling. But everything I'm doing collectively is something I would call a career. And like my day-to-day is technically IT director, which kind of fits into both of those. Do you get my problem?
I do. I also have a personal story with this. Like, timing is everything, I think, with a book like this. I was the other day editing Intentional Family on my iPad. So if you were to ask me, what do I do for a living? I would say that I am a creator and I write and speak about productivity and technology. And intentionality, I think, falls into that for me. So I consider that part of my work, even though it's not a large part of my income. But in my opinion, there's a common thread between that, the stuff that I do for the Sweet Setup, Bookworm, Focused, everything. And I was editing the podcast and I was in career mode where I'm editing this thing. It's really Rachel's show. She creates all of the outlines. She basically plans all the episodes. I show up, I talk, and then I edit and publish it. So I was like, I got to get this thing out the door because it's going to release the next morning. And I'm sitting at the kitchen table. I'm editing it in Fairlight on my iPad, which is the way that I prefer to edit podcasts. And I'm in work mode. Toby walks by, my 12-year-old, and he just is like passing through the kitchen. I don't know. He just like got something to eat and was like leaving. And then he makes this passing comment. He's like, you know, you have the coolest job in the world. He's like, more people should do what you do. And he doesn't really understand everything that's involved with this.
Right.
But it was one of those things that it just arrested my attention. I'm like, you know what? You're right. I do have a pretty awesome job. So even that one moment, that adjusted my perspective from career to calling, I feel. And this is something I feel like I've been sensitive with in the past, and kind of this book was a reminder to get back to that. Like, go back to the basics, go back to the original core motivations you had when you were doing these things. Do you still want to do those? The other thing that I want to call out here is the should versus must. You mentioned this. So she defines these. On page 28, she says, there are two paths in life, should and must. We arrive at these crossroads over and over again, and every day we get to choose. And she defines should as how other people want us to live our life, and must as who we are, what we believe, and what we do when we are alone with our truest, most authentic self. Those aren't necessarily different things. And that's where the exercise comes in, which is actually part of the next part. So put a pin in that temporarily, because I just want to call out basically that you may have lived your life according to other people's shoulds. That doesn't mean that those are the wrong shoulds, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are the right ones either. And I can see this in my own life. My parents, like traditional parents, I think they are concerned about their kids and they want to see them do well. Okay. But sometimes that manifests as worry, and you're like, you know what? I'm good. I'll figure this out. Everything's going to be okay. I will probably do the same thing when my kids grow up. I recognize that's part of the deal here. But I also, reflecting on my life, I recognize that they kind of coached me or encouraged me to go certain directions because they knew that financially I would be better off. My family would be more secure, things like that. And I don't necessarily think that all of those decisions that I have made based on their guidance were necessarily the right decisions. Now, it is what it is. It's in the past. I'm not going to worry about missed opportunities or things like that, but I do want to recognize that going forward, sometimes the right path is not the easiest path. And I've got to balance that because I also have responsibilities. I got to put food on the table. Also interesting to me, like I'm going through this book, and kind of the question it makes you wrestle with is, what if everything you knew disappeared? What if you lost your job tomorrow? What would you do? I had to go through that.
Yep.
So at this point, it's like, bring it on. I lived through it once. What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I get it. I mean, it's difficult. This is why I struggle with this somewhat, because like I should keep my head down, do a good job at my job, so that I can provide an income for my family and give them stability. Like those are the shoulds there. You could probably argue that there's a must in there. Is like I must provide for my family and put food on the table. Like those are probably the two musts in there. And going to the 9 to 5, which in my case is like an 8 to 4, going to that and working hard at that is maybe a should, but in my head it's a must because that's what provides for the other two. So I struggle. The whole time I was going through the latter half of like the last 75% of the book, I struggled to like, okay, so what qualifies as one or the other? Because I feel like just depending on how I look at it, it would change from one side to the other.
That is the uncomfortable question that it makes you answer.
Sure. Maybe that's the point.
Yeah. She says in this section, what if who we are and what we do become one and the same? And I think that's where a lot of the people who are frustrated with their current job, that's at the root of it, is that they know that this isn't what I should be doing. I've got something more to offer the world, but this is the safe thing. This is the secure thing. So I've just stayed here and I've never really tested to see, what I'm really capable of. And that's going to be different for every single person who reads this. Some people I could see, like if you're later on in life and you have regret about a missed opportunity early on, this could be really emotional. This could just wreck you.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a great place to stay either. Like it really shouldn't be the kind of thing that makes you feel bad for the water that's gone under the bridge, but it should inspire you to make the most of the opportunity and the time that's in front of you, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I think if I was in a spot where I wasn't sure what I should be doing and was looking for a job, this would be very, very different. The fact that I'm in a stable job and in the middle of side ventures and have a lot going on, and I feel like those are good things. Like I don't feel like I'm in a complete hole. Sometimes I do not like what I do day to day, but it's the way things go. Like you can't have a job that has zero downsides. I've never, even people who have their dream job, it has downsides. So
funny you bring up the dream job. So I have another story here.
I'm on a roll today.
Shortly after Toby provided unintended enlightenment, we had a Toastmasters meeting, a virtual Toastmasters meeting, and I was in attendance. They're usually sparsely attended in the summer specifically, especially when they're virtual. So like the roles were filled, but part of a Toastmasters meeting is table topics where you get an opportunity to speak for 2 to 3 minutes extemporaneously. So you don't know what you're going to have to speak on until right before they give you your topic, go. And because I didn't have any other roles, I kind of went into this meeting thinking I was going to be selected for table topics. And I was. So the question that I was asked was, if you could have your dream job, what would it be? And my answer was what I am doing right now. And it's interesting because not too long ago, James Clear put out a call for a podcast editor. And if you would have asked me a couple of years ago, everything about that job description, that was my dream job.
Yeah.
But I am working with Blanc Media, and it's not just being grateful for what I have. The more I sit and think about like what I really have here and compare it to the other options, I'm able to say, no, that's not for me. Like I did not apply for the James Clear thing, even though all the people that I respect online, like Sean McCabe, for example, he's tweeting about it. He's like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. This is an incredible job. Like,
yeah,
this for somebody out there, this has your name on it and you know who you are. And at the time I was like, is that me? Should I? Nah, no. I finally resolved like, no, not going to do it.
Right.
And it was interesting to me that I did that. Like I didn't even put in an application because I could have done that and then just like, well, let's see how things shake out. I probably would have taken that approach in the past, just like hedged my bets, let's see what happens here. But
sure,
I don't know. I just felt I hesitate to say this because I think a lot of people who use this like feeling sort of stuff end up being a little bit flaky,
Yes.
at least for me.
Yes.
But I just felt at peace about where I was, and it's gone really well. Like every 8th week I get off. How awesome is that? I get to work from home and create stuff that I love talking about. Like this is, I don't know, it's easy to view the grass as greener somewhere else. It's also easy to just, get locked into what you currently do. And this book for me, the result of having gone through this was to crystallize, like, I really did make the right choice, that this is the right spot for me, at least right now. I know that like I'm going to grow and I'm going to change, and maybe it's not the right spot for me 5 years from now. I have no idea. I kind of think it will be. We'll see how it goes though.
Yeah, I feel like you don't know that. Like when you first start a new job, I feel like there's no way to know. There's just not. I mean, you can make some good guesses.
You can tell if it's wrong.
Correct. Yeah, some jobs you know immediately when it's wrong. But I feel like it's hard to know if it's truly going to be a long-term success for maybe a year or more. I feel like it takes time. I mean, sometimes it probably isn't going to require that. I feel like that's probably going to be, it could be dependent on the onboarding process for the company. Think about Basecamp. I mean, everybody likes to use Basecamp as an example. Their onboarding process takes multiple months before you are fully into before you're fully entrenched in the company. So that's a thing that they do, and they're very particular about that. Not every company does that. And I know there have been positions that I've jumped into in the past where day one I was asked to kick out reports and I didn't even have a computer yet. Come on, people. Like, those are scenarios where this is not going to be pleasant. But it seems like that's pretty common too.
Yeah, not to pick on you too much, but
it.
I would argue that probably the reason that wasn't a great fit is because you were looking at it through the job or the career lens.
Yeah.
And not the calling lens. If you had a different perspective, and I've done the same thing, so, but since you brought it up, like if you had viewed it through the calling lens, you maybe would have decided a lot sooner that, I just don't want to be here. There's something else out there.
I didn't want to be there before I started. Like I knew that.
Exactly.
That was I got to put food on the table job.
Yes. So something in the job column, money,
Yep.
overrode all of the other stuff.
Correct. Now this is jumping ahead to part 3, but there is a money part to this.
Yep.
And there's two different types of money. Like you have to have it, like bare necessities money, and then there's the extras. That was an attempt for me to put the bare minimum on the table sort of job.
Yep.
That's what that was.
Do what you got to do. Right.
So it only lasted a handful of months. That's all it needed to last, but it did the job.
Yeah, and everybody who is going to give you well-intentioned advice will tend to view it, I think, from that perspective. It's like, oh, this is a great job because you're going to be provided for and you're not going to have to worry about where your next meal is going to come from. For some people, worrying about where the next meal is going to come from is way better than worrying about what you're walking into when you get to the office.
Right.
All right, let's move on here.
Yeah, I feel like I just jumped all over on you. Sorry.
We did. All right, part 2 is the origin of should. And this has a couple of things here. Page 41, she says that shoulds are put on you from the moment that you are born. I agree with that statement. Now, they're not always bad things, though. Sometimes shoulds are put on you, they become must, but the important thing is to filter them through your own lens and not somebody else. Even if you really respect them, really care for them, you need to make these decisions for yourself. So one of the exercises that she gives you in this book is to make a list of the shoulds that you hold on to. Now, I made a list of shoulds. It could probably be like 5 times longer if I spent more time thinking about this.
Yes.
But this is the thing I asked you about, like, hey, would you be comfortable sharing some of this stuff on the air? So you got your list of shoulds?
I do. I don't know if it's what you're after, but I'm also not sure.
Well, I don't think it's what Ellie Luna was after. The things that I wrote down here.
I don't know.
But yeah, why don't you share some of yours?
So some of this is small. I've got 3 I'll share, okay? And this starts with, she has a thing where there's some blanks, like, you should never blank. You should always blank.
I didn't think those were helpful at all, by the way.
You didn't? See, that's what actually helped me figure out what she was trying to get me to do.
Mine, every single one of them is you should, and then fill in the blank.
Sure.
So I tried to fill in the blanks with the prompts that she gave me, and I realized I couldn't come up with anything when I framed it that way.
Okay. Interesting, because I couldn't come up with anything until I got those. So that was interesting too. It's so different. That's awesome. This one's small, and I was just writing down the first thing that came to my mind whenever I went through these. You know, again, ADD race car brain here with bicycle brakes. And the first one was, you should never, and the very first thing that went through my head was, use email as a task list. That was the first thing that went through my head. And I had that thought, and I think it's because I use email as a task list. And people tell me I'm not supposed to.
You're not.
But I do. So maybe that doesn't qualify because I break that one. I don't know.
I think that's an interesting example. So let's stop there for a second, because I also have some productivity related ones, like, you should get up earlier.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Right.
Because somebody else said so. And so that's really the value of this thing, is like, I've heard this before over and over and over again. Just because somebody that I respect and who gets a lot done has said that I should get up earlier doesn't necessarily mean that I should get up earlier, that I must, as part of who I am, get up earlier. Maybe I'm just wired different and 7 a.m. is fine. You know, maybe I don't need to be part of the 5 a.m. club, and it won't impact me at all. The thing that really makes me question that one specifically is my gap book, which is recommended from one of these live chats, Daily Rituals, How Artists Work by Mason Curry. And it's basically like a page, 2 pages on all of these creative people and their daily routines, how they went about their day. They are so different. Some people slept 5 hours and then they were going. Some people slept like 10 hours. Some people were up before dawn. Some people started their day at noon. They all created a lot of really cool stuff. And this has kind of challenged me to figure out my own creative rhythm.
I feel like that would be a good one for Bookworm.
Maybe.
Something ritual based. We've done a lot of habits, but not a whole lot with full on rituals.
Right.
I could be interested in that. Here, let me give you my second one, because I feel like this one's going to prompt the conversation of, where does this fit? And it was, you should always notify my wife of my whereabouts. And that one, okay, must I do that? Or should I do that?
Well, first of all, where did that should come from?
It's from her and me, I would say. It's kind of a pact between the two of us to make sure we're always aware of what's going on so that we can plan on and know what's going on. But we should.
Then that one's probably a must.
Is it? That's the thing. But that's what I should do this. But must I?
That's the question. And every time that you say no, I'm going to push back against one of these things that I have embraced, is there's going to be fallback from it. And you have to decide if the amount of fallback that you are going to get is worth the additional benefit that you're gaining by cutting loose that obligation that you've just taken onto yourself.
So is the difference between a should and a must simply the amount of fallback that you're willing to deal with?
Well, the shoulds have been put on you, and you've assumed them as, I must do these things. And for me, this exercise is identifying the musts that you want to let go. Not every must should be let go. You could say, you know what, Becky, I'm not going to tell you where I'm going, and you're just going to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Probably won't go well.
I'm my own person. You don't need to know where I'm at.
Yeah.
I can see this being a very bad, difficult conversation.
Yeah. So is that a conversation you want to have? Is it worth it? But when it comes to things like a job that you don't like and you've just assumed that I need to keep doing this thing because I got to keep putting bread on the table, sometimes it's worth envisioning an alternate reality. Not saying you want to envision an alternate reality for your marriage.
This is just not. Do you get what I'm saying? This is different because it's. And again, maybe this is her point. I didn't catch that this is her point, if it is. But it seems like the core difference between should and must is the amount of pain you'd have to deal with to let it go. And somewhere, like you're just trying to figure out where that line is. And if it's above that and it's more painful to let it go, then it's a must. And if it's not as painful, it's a should. Do you get what I'm saying? Like it seems like it's all the same thing, just a matter of
sure
how much difficulty there is.
Well, I guess in my opinion, I've got my shoulds, and some of them were from points in my past where people had told me things, and so some of them I've kind of pushed back against already. But a lot of them, as they are applied to my life right now, I viewed them as these are things that I have involuntarily assumed as I must do these things. And so I took it as an opportunity to question every single one of those things.
Sure.
And for each and everything, there is both a pain and discomfort that comes from pushing against the status quo that is offset by the amount of gain or enjoyment or joy or happiness, whatever you get from the freedom of no longer having to live up to that expectation.
Okay. Can I give you my last one?
My opinion. Yep, go for it.
I'm going to give you my last one. You should never quit your job without a plan or knowing what's next. Because I feel like that's really painful to quit not knowing what comes next. And the only reason that was on my mind, because that is exactly what she did.
Yeah.
It's like, I just had to rent this apartment, and I checked my bank account, and I knew I could go 3 months without a paycheck, so I quit my job. I was like, what? You did what?
Yeah.
And I felt like and again, this is what got me off on the wrong foot. It made me think that she's a bit flaky, and I'm like, I don't want to be taking advice from somebody who does that. So like, I was like, if she's going to have that mentality and take that high level of risk, like, no, I'm not going to follow your opinions here. Now, some of that, I need to back off of that a little bit because she's a single person. She didn't have a family and kids. I don't know if she does now or not. I don't know. Side note, she was working for Mailbox at the time. I think it was Mailbox she was working on. So let's go back in time. Mailbox is the one that brought us swiping for our emails. And she was one of the designers for Mailbox.
Somebody needs to hire her.
she be careful, she'll quit on you. She'll quit and go start painting.
But I feel like that was the last major innovation email has ever gotten. Well, up until Hey.
Yeah. Right until Hey. Yeah, for sure. That whole concept was just on my mind as I was reading this, and I couldn't get it out of my head. So whenever she said you should never, that was the first thing that jumped in my head because she had been talking about it. So again, should you quit your job if you don't have the next thing lined up or have a solid plan for your income that can be quickly realized? I would tell you that is one of the worst decisions you could make. So you should never do that. But again, that's a should. In my mind, there's a lot of pain involved with that, but I felt like she was encouraging that to some degree.
Well, I am of two minds here because I am a logical, rational planner who wants to have everything figured out. So I have taken the exact same approach that you just took. Like, that is terrible advice. Never, ever, ever do that.
Right.
Then I got laid off and had to go through it anyways, even though I wasn't in control of it.
Right.
And it was the most terrifying, most stressful period of my entire life. And I would argue that everybody should go through that at some point. So I would say it's better to be in charge of that than to be not in charge of that process.
Yep.
I also don't think you go through that for the fun of it, but I think that there's a possibility that you can tell this is a tipping point for me, and you can go one of two ways. You can make the leap, so to speak, which interestingly, she tells you not to make the leap later on. We'll get to that part and kind of the nuance there. Or you can take the safe route and just, for somebody else, for a single person, for someone who doesn't have a family, for someone who doesn't have all these obligations already, like, they could do that, but I could never do that. I guess I'm a little emboldened because the worst case scenario became my reality for a while. and I made it through, and I'm not going to say I'm glad that I had to go through that, but I also don't think I would have got where I am now had I not gone through it. So I don't know. I've been there where it's like, why would you put yourself in that sort of situation? And then having gone through it, I realized that putting yourself in that sort of situation is where all the growth happens. So that's exactly why you would do that sort of thing. Those can be a catalyst moments for helping you reach your full potential. And full potential is not just a better job that pays more, has more benefits, whatever. It really is like the thing that you are put here on earth to do. Now, I've got a whole course, Faith-Based Productivity, where I teach the concept of a life theme. And that's super important to me. So take this with a grain of salt, I guess, if you don't agree with that sort of thing. You're just trying to accumulate as much as you can so you can retire as early as you can, so you can take it easy for as long as you can. That's fine. Yeah. Like if that is your goal, more power to you, but that's not what I want to do. So maybe that disqualifies me as a voice of reason in your head. That's fine. That's just where I'm coming from.
Sure. Well, you should know I've been in that boat too. And, I was asked to submit my resignation from a company and made the decision to go my own because we had an emergency fund whenever that happened. So in a sense, we made that decision to do it voluntarily, and it led to the worst 2.5 years in struggle I've ever dealt with.
Yep.
And I don't wish that on anybody, and I would highly recommend you avoid it at all costs. So I have the opposite on that one.
Sure.
Chose to go down that path and have regretted it almost ever since. So it has led to a ton of learning. I've picked up a lot of skills in the process. I felt like it's helped my character in a lot of ways. There are positives to it, but I would much rather have gone through a different in-job position doing that, not out of desperation in an attempt to find dollars like that. That's not what I would wish on anybody.
Yeah, desperation that's not a great place to be. And I get it. Like, I was there. One of the hardest things for me to cope with was we had never had credit card debt. And then the month that we could not pay off the credit card balance, I went into a depression.
Yeah.
And then every month, just saw that balance tick up, and there's nothing you can do about it. That was gut-wrenching, but we made it through that. So I guess I'm looking back on it with a different set of eyes now. And when I think back to that period, I question whether it needed to be as bad as it was. Like, the way my brain works, I feel like maybe I missed something. Maybe I was offered a lifeline and I just completely didn't even see it. And I made it worse than it needed to be. I don't know. I definitely get where you're coming from, where like you don't want to be there. If you can avoid that situation, you want to avoid that situation. I guess my argument is just that you don't know that it's going to end up there when you decide like, hey, I'm going to go see what this alternate path leads to. And yes, it might get to that point. That's kind of like the whole Tim Ferriss fear setting thing. Worst case scenario, that I don't have enough to pay my bills every month and we are racking up credit card debt. If you would have asked me, I would have said, yes, that is absolutely the worst case scenario. I'm absolutely not going to go there. Well, I went there.
Right.
And I made it. It didn't kill me like I thought it would.
Sure.
So I just want to, I guess, encourage people not to ditch the lifeline and to go do something crazy, but to weigh these things and maybe bet on yourself a little bit more. If I think back to my career path, I feel like I could have done a better job with that. And maybe I would have arrived at where I'm at a little bit sooner.
Sure. Yeah. I still won't encourage people to do it. Not like, if you want to go your own and you want to do your own thing, I'll tell you do it nights and weekends until it's successful and then cut over.
Yep.
I'll do it every time. But
and I think that's what she would say.
To quit and go, like, No. Like I ran across someone who was recommending to a friend that they should quit their job and start a YouTube channel because they're really good on camera. How many YouTubers do you know that have made a full-time income off of it within 2 months?
Right.
I can't, even like the huge names, I can't even think of anyone who did that.
Yep.
So don't.
Marquez Brownlee, MKBHD, Matt Raglan posted about this recently, which brought it to my attention. And he shared his 100th video that he made. Mm-hmm. So the great MKBHD, who has however many millions of subscribers, after making 100 videos, had 76 subscribers.
Yes.
At that point, you can't justify that as a career switch. But he also put in the work, and he continued to push, and he got it to where it is now. And that's the thing, is the consistency. You don't know where things are going to lead, but it's not. I can tell you, it's not going to happen as quickly as you think it will.
No,
regardless of how much you plan, how much you research. I have a friend. Well, I say a friend, but he was a kid in the youth group when we started helping out with it. So I'm quite a bit older than he is, but he was going to college. He was doing some internet marketing. He was pursuing the path that his parents basically were saying, this is the way that you go to get a good job. And he discovered Twitch streaming, and he had always had he had done the Super Smash Brothers tournaments. He'd been really good at those. He'd go compete different places. I didn't even know that was a thing, but he was doing that, when he was in high school. So Twitch streaming, speed running, all that sort of stuff. He's like, maybe I can make a career out of this. And he had a talk with his parents, and they're like, well, you can try this if you really want to, but you've got 1 month and then you got to start making money. Otherwise you got to go back to bussing tables at some place.
Right.
And he put in the work. And after month 1, he's like, you know what? I don't have anything yet, but Dad, I think there's something here. Give me 2 more months. Like, all right, fine. You could have 3 months total. And then you either get a real job or you move out.
Yep.
And he did. And now he's got sponsors, and he goes to these conferences, and he's in the celebrity line for the meet and greets.
Sure.
He was actually a kid that I discipled for a while. So I would encourage him to hey, just keep pushing, see where this goes, put in the work, but be willing to walk away from it if it doesn't work.
Sure.
And I look back at that now, and I'm like, how many people have I convinced to walk away from the thing that was really their thing? I don't want to be responsible for that. I also don't want to be the one who's like, hey, just make the leap. It'll all be fine. You have to balance that. And kind of my takeaway from all this is, don't give any advice. Share your story and don't tell anybody what to do.
All right. Sure. I think this background of mine in dealing with job stuff and it not going very well, I think might have tainted, and this might be why I struggle with should versus must, because I've been stuck in this I need to put food on the table state for long enough that to try to think about, do I really love what I'm doing? Frankly, it doesn't matter. I don't care if it's something you love doing or not. You still have to do these things. And it's primarily you can have these calling conversations and start to make adjustments to what you love to do when you have the surplus time, finances, space to do that. I have zero qualms with going down that road, but your bare minimums need taken care of first. I think you're allowed to do that when you get to that point, but until you've got the mortgage paid and food on the table, I don't care if you don't like driving pizzas to people's houses. It puts it takes care of your base minimums, so don't worry about that. So I think it's important to point out this has to come from the surplus.
Yep.
It has to come from that. If I say I didn't like the whole world of things that I'm doing right now, I'm going to bust my tail nights and weekends to build something that gives me the opportunity to step away from it. Or I'm going to start looking for other things, a different job to apply to. That's what the route I would go. I'm not going to go and say, hey, I don't like working here, I quit.
Yep.
And then go start applying. That's totally backwards.
Yeah, the side hustle can become the main hustle at some point, but you have to have it start as a side hustle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're
sure.
you're delivering pizzas. The trick is don't just deliver pizzas and complain about how bad things are.
Yes.
Do something on the side that will maybe lead to where you want to end up, even if you don't know exactly what that looks like yet. Which I think she would agree with. Well, she talks about that in another section, which we'll get there. I'll just share some of mine real quick so we can move on here.
Sure. Yeah, we've been going for over an hour here now, so
which is not how I thought this episode would go, to be honest, but that's cool. I like it.
Throw me on video and I get talkative apparently. Sorry about that.
So here's some of my shoulds. You should go to college. I would say absolutely not. In fact, like I should clarify that. For some people, you do have to go to college, but it's not going to be the default advice that I give my kids. I'm not going to say, go sign up for a bunch of student debt at the beginning because you don't know what you're going to do yet. I mentioned you should get up earlier. You should get a real job. You should be realistic. And this is the thing I feel like I have used as an excuse so many times throughout my life.
Sure.
Is, well, that's great that they were able to do that. And I get inspired by the people who had this dream and it became a reality and now they're doing something awesome. But I was like, you just got to be realistic. They can do that maybe, but you can't. There's a lot of stuff here related to my routines that I listed. And this is why I think that this exercise was valuable, is that you automatically kind of assume these as musts, but maybe they're not musts. What this did for me is it kind of confirmed a lot of these in my opinion. So personally, for me, the expectation is the church that we go to, you should go to church 3 times a week, twice on Sunday and once midweek. That's not going to be for everybody. I'm not going to project that on you or anybody else. But as I ask myself, is this an expectation that people have placed on me and I don't really want to be there? Or is it something that, I'm going to voluntarily sign up for, I must go to church 3 times a week. And for me, I see the growth that comes from being there consistently. So yes, 100%, I am on board with that one. You should read your Bible and you should pray every day. Again, 100% on board with those. You should exercise every day. You should read more. You should brush your teeth twice a day. You should floss every day. All of these things are things that I do already. And I'm not going to rebel against the dentist's orders because that dictator dentist, I don't want him telling me what to do. I'll brush my teeth when I feel like it. I know that there's good that comes from that. And it's not just he's trying to cramp my style. You should have a weekly date night. And this is starting to get into the territory where it's this is something that I've heard people say, but do we really need to do this? And for me, absolutely, we need to do this. It doesn't happen all the time. That's the thing that gets me thinking about it is is it really necessary? Because sometimes it doesn't work out and it seems like things are fine. But I know in my heart of hearts, when I take an honest look at this stuff, that yes, this is providing immense benefit to my relationship with my wife. It is worth the investment. Let's see. You should take the safe job. You should have insurance. You should put the kids in music lessons. You should put the kids in sports. Those two specifically, we've been kind of rethinking those based on the pandemic and the quarantine and how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
Because in March, when they were in music lessons, when they were playing sports, all that just shut down. And so now this is kind of cool because is this a should that someone has ascribed to us? Or is this a must where we feel like this is what we have to do?
Right.
And kind of it's in the middle. So we want to do these things, but not the way that we have been doing them.
Right.
And so rather than take the kids to the music store where they have lesson after lesson after lesson after lesson, one right after the other on Monday nights, and our whole Monday night is gone, we're starting to do virtual lessons with one of the missionaries that we support. Actually, the missionaries that Rachel and I, when we went down to Costa Rica on our missions trip that we worked with, they're really, really good musically. And a lot of the stuff that they do is worship related at different churches down there. They're looking for ways to increase their funds while all of the economics fallout is happening from all of this. So we're doing private video Zoom piano lessons with people who ultimately this is going to get us where we want our kids to be with music far better than the classical teacher at the local music store.
Sure.
So it's a win, and it's just took a pandemic for us to reconsider why are we doing things this way? But I thought that was an interesting example recently. You should go to bed earlier. You should be responsible. You should provide for your family. You should grow up already.
I don't want to do that one.
So some of these things, these are, like I said, stuff that I've heard in the past. And if I were to really unpack these, there's more things associated with that than just what's on the surface level. But I recognize from doing this exercise that when someone tells me that I should do something, my initial reaction is not to do it, even if it's going to be good for me.
Right.
And sometimes you can wear me out and I'll give in, and then I'll just do it consistently and it becomes a habit or routine. And every once in a while, I've got to go through and clean out that cruft. But I also think that the personal retreats that I do have helped with this because I force myself to pick something to stop doing every time. So I didn't end up with a big list of musts that I've assumed that I needed to cut loose. Whereas if I hadn't done that, I can easily see how I would have ended up there.
Sure. I don't know where to jump in on that, but I know you've got an interesting list of shoulds. I didn't go quite that far with it. I think it makes sense to do that. Maybe I should spend some more time with it. I don't know. I think
You should give the book another chance, Joe.
I don't have to.
There, you've learned your lesson. See.
I'm just not there. I think I'm in a wrong season or came out of a wrong season for it.
Sure, that's totally fine. I just wanted to share some of my stuff.
No, I think it's helpful. I think it'd be good for other people to hear that for sure.
Cool. All right, let's move on to. Oh, actually, one other thing with this. The other point I had in the outline, which I'll just call out here. A prison isn't always a physical place. She mentions that on page 45, our prison is constructed from a lifetime of shoulds, the worlds of choices we've unwittingly agreed to, the walls that alienate us from our truest, most authentic selves. Just because you've assumed some shoulds doesn't mean that they're wrong, but I do think that it's worth questioning things. So the prison analogy maybe makes it seem like this is something that you automatically should rebel against the man. You know, you should push back against everything that you've known and do the opposite. And I don't think that's necessarily the right approach, but it is worth considering those things. Sure. And that's really what the exercise, in my opinion, helped me to do. So,
okay.
All right. That being said, part 3, must. There are 4 big concerns about musts. And so must in this sense is kind of like, for her, it would be, I must create art. For me, I'm not sure. I must podcast. I don't know. I've kind of gone through this a little bit, I think, where I was doing something very different than a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now. And I kind of went through that. Like, I don't want to be doing this in 10 years. So I kind of feel like I found my life theme, so to speak. But when you're going through this transition or you're considering this transition, there are 4 big concerns that people have: the money, the time, the space, and the vulnerability. Now, with time specifically, you mentioned the style of this book and you showed it on the video where she's got like this, sometimes the words she's painting in like big, broad brushstrokes.
Right.
In this section for time, she wrote, "But I have 5 kids and a mortgage." And I was like, yes, I do have 5 kids and a mortgage. How did you know, Ellie?
Awesome.
And also, like I said, I've kind of gone through this unexpectedly with being laid off from the previous gig. So in the past, this would have been the thing like, I can't do that. I can't try to envision something different. Like, this is safe. This is good. Like, I'll just find the good in what I've got here, and let's not look for anything different. Let's not rock the boat because I have responsibilities. And so that one, like, not only is that true to me, but it is also the exact same excuse that I used however many months ago.
Okay. If go for it. I mean, you should podcast, Mike.
I must podcast.
You like podcasting. You like talking. You enjoy jumping on a microphone, and I'm hoping I get you into streaming now. And this is a thing that you should do because you love doing it and you're good at it. So you should do it.
You could make the argument, though, that you've got 5 kids and a mortgage and podcasts ain't paying the bills. So you should just let this go and do something else.
Yep.
But anyways, that's me. So these 4 big concerns, you mentioned the money before.
Yes,
you want to talk about this piece?
Yeah. So like there's 4 concerns here, and essentially these are arguments against her. And these are, I guess, excuses to not follow your must, if you will. One of those is the money thing. We talked about that earlier, the necessary money versus the extra money. Time, you will make time for the things that are important to you that you must do. Space, kind of, do you have the physical space, I guess, for it would be the way to do it, to say that. I would also potentially translate that into, do you have the emotional space to do it as well?
Yep. Because she talks in that part about must loving play and needing solitude.
Right. And then vulnerability, you don't want to put yourself out there. And that's been some of my own concern with doing things like a YouTube channel or Twitch streaming and stuff. Like I've had the skills and the ability to do this sort of thing for a while. I just didn't want to put myself out there like that. And I think I've kind of gotten comfortable enough with this that I can jump on these and have fun. Who knows if I'm any good at it, but it's fun for me. So there you go. So like these 4 things, money, time, space, and vulnerability, like these are some of the things that people say they like these are excuses for not following through on your must. And in this case, it would be like not following through on your calling, I guess would be the other way to say this. The next section after this is don't make the leap. Again, it's
that's part of this section actually. So you can go there if you want.
Sure. Like this is what I was saying earlier, is like making the jump without having a known what you're going to. Like that, to me, that is just a horrible thing to do. And this is where she's saying, don't do that. But again, this breaks down her foundation because it's exactly what she did.
It is.
So I really, really struggled to trust and follow her advice when she doesn't follow her advice. Maybe this is where it's like, do what I say, not what I do. Like maybe it's one of those scenarios. Come on, be consistent. Like it's been a while since I've run across a book where I was like, these are such competing thoughts in the same book. Like
sure.
Okay, I'll quit. Apparently I'm fired up about this one.
I don't necessarily think they are competing, to be fair. I think we don't get all of the details of her story at the beginning. So we don't know how often she got home from her designer job and was like, I just need an outlet. I'm going to paint. And maybe she did that for 10 years before she had the dream. And she's like, you know what? I really need to paint more. And she omits those details. So I'm just like filling in blanks that aren't even necessarily there. But
she told the story about how she had to go buy supplies. So I know that wasn't true.
Okay.
She had to go, she remembered the smell and she's like, oh, it took her back to her college days. And
sure.
She had to go buy supplies. She wasn't painting.
So. I don't know how old she is. I'm not sure how big a gap there was between having the dream and her college days.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a very valid question.
But the point she makes at the beginning of this is that in fact, she has an exercise here where you write 2 versions of your obituary. This is, I think, valuable for anybody who hasn't considered this before, but it is something that we've heard over and over and over again in different books that we've read, where one version of the obituary is the one that you want to have, and the other one is where you are headed right now. And I feel like if you have gone through any sort of thought exercise along those lines, it's easy to see how, I'm climbing a corporate ladder, but this isn't really what I want to be doing. And so I should drop everything and find something else. And again, we're getting into like details and semantics here of like how long ago was it that she was painting. You don't want to just pick something that you have no idea that you're going to be any good at.
Right.
If you've gone to college for art, you're probably pretty good at it. So you feel like at least on some level, I can be successful with this. Maybe I can't make a living, but I can at least sell art.
Yeah.
If no one's buying my paintings, I'll tell you that right now. So if I had this dream, like absolutely not chasing that one. And I think that's a little bit different than her having it. So again, I'm kind of filling in details here that she doesn't really get into, but she does say in the time section that you have to find your must 10 minutes at a time. And the point under the don't make the leap is not to put yourself or others at risk. Must is too important to be chosen on a whim. So that kind of makes me think that if she really is believing that a must is too important to be chosen on a whim, there must have been some additional things that were going through her head before she made that leap. It was not a single vivid dream that caused her to just drop everything and go somewhere. That's almost like you hear stories about missionaries or whatever, like God appeared to them in a dream, and so they immediately changed everything about their lives. Maybe that is what happened with her, but that's not the impression that I got from going through this. I don't know. Obviously, you read it a little bit differently than I did.
I was looking for those details, because if she had done that, it would have fit her narrative perfectly, and she should have told us. Like, it would have been the exact thing she needed to tell us at that time. Like, I didn't do this. This is how I did it. Like, it would have been perfect. But she didn't do that.
She did not do that. You're right. She does say eventually everything connects, but we are left wondering where those dots are.
Yes. So do you get the disconnect? Like, I don't trust her because she just jumped. Like, she had a dream about an apartment, and her friend told her, maybe you should try to find it. And she starts looking at ads and finds a white apartment. So she rents it out. Like, who does that? And then she decides that because she has the apartment, now her heart is empty and has to quit her job and start painting. Like, that's like, how did we get here? Like that, yeah. It was so fast and so on a whim that I struggle when she says, don't just follow a whim. Like, well, I won't, but you certainly did. So I'm going to defend her a little bit here. You know, she's a designer during the mailbox days, you said. Yep. So yeah. I don't remember exactly when that was, but it occurs to me that was a little while ago, and she's in San Francisco. She probably could have at any point decided art's not working and walk into basically what she had left because of the demand for it. Maybe that was going through her head when she's like, I got to try this. But you're right that she didn't explain that way. Yes. Yeah. Again, that would have made perfect sense because you're absolutely right. If she's a designer at Mailbox, because of the way that they revolutionized email apps on iOS devices, because of that, all she would have to do is say, I helped design that. And she could get in pretty much anywhere she wants.
Doesn't even matter how big her part was.
Right. It doesn't. Just I was on that team is all it would take. And that would fit perfect. In order, like, I feel like that is one detail that would help solidify the whole thing. But it was left out.
Sure.
Now, granted, to defend her here, I think that some of that is left out because she is trying to keep it anonymous. Like, the only reason I know the mailbox thing, one, I was trying to figure out when it was. I was looking at, like, when was this written and when did all of this happen? And there's a thing at the back that's, like, about her. Where is this? Yeah, she paints, designs, and writes, and then it goes through all of this. And she worked as a designer at IDEO, startups like Mailbox, Medium, and Uber. So that's on her resume. So if you know that, like, she could go pretty much anywhere she wants. Like,
she's amassed a lot of career capital in Cal Newport's world.
Right. But at the same time, at the very beginning, like, she's saying she only had 3 months worth of an emergency fund. Like, she could live for 3 months without any income.
Which in San Francisco is like $300,000, but
it could be, yeah. I mean, it's not a small number, but do you understand my qualm here? Like, I feel like these are details. Like, she has a fallback plan, I think. And that is why she feels compelled to say, don't make this leap. Don't just jump out there without putting yourself or your family or anyone at risk. Like she says that, even though at the beginning she used that risk concept in order to hook you at the beginning. This is my qualm with it.
Gotcha. Okay. I guess I completely overlooked the marketing aspect of the story at the beginning because I agree with the message.
Again, this is because I started off on a very bad foot with this book. And that led me to critiquing everything, which is abnormal for me. So
that's interesting because at the beginning, I also did not like the first 30 pages or so. But once we got into the origin of should, my impression of the book significantly changed.
Sure.
And as I went along, again, I didn't know who Joseph Campbell was. That's probably a good thing. But there's a lot of quotes in here that I did like. She shared one by Mark Twain. The two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you figure out why. I've used that one myself.
Right.
But it was a good reminder to me, I guess, as I was reading this. And again, maybe it's right thing, right time for me for a lot of this stuff. But I feel like she did a pretty good job of tying the message together. I'm slipping into style and rating. We should move on to part 4, The Return. Unless there's anything else you want to say about not making the leap.
No, I need to stop ranting. So let's go part 4.
Okay. Actually, one other thing, just to clarify why the message she's telling in this part of the book is the right one. She says, what is one action that you can take to honor your calling today? So she's basically coaching people at this point. Do not make the leap. Don't follow the dream that you had about the white apartment like I did, to your point. Part 4, though, is The Return. This is where she talks about how you can find your must and it can change on you. She says that the must changes basically as you change, so does the work. So if you're viewing the work as part of your calling, that isn't necessarily going to look the same 5 years from now as it does today.
Yes. I think this is where I start to agree with her a lot on this part. And that's because in my scenarios, I've been in that mode where it's I just need dollars to pay the mortgage. I've been in that mode and am now in a spot where that is taken care of, that base is taken care of. And then I have these side things that I work on that are kind of the extra, that surplus. So I've shifted out of that and have now shifted into a less risky state. And I can see how my intent and the things that I like to do and the things that I feel like I need to go do in order to help other people, that has been changing, especially in the mediums through which I do that. So that is something that I think I'm in the middle of a transition for that right now. And I can see how that it definitely changes over time, especially if you think about it, LeBron James, when he's 80, is not going to have a must of playing in the NBA.
Yep.
You have to change in some form.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're stuck at 4 years old all your life.
So at the beginning of this crazy year, Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash.
Right.
And that was a pretty big deal because he's a pretty big celebrity. And after that happened, obviously, a bunch of retrospective stuff on the life of Kobe came out. And so when that happened, I started to dig into and realize what he had been doing after he had retired from basketball, which was only a couple of years ago at this point. But he was basically leaning into his role as a mentor. And he was taking it upon himself to encourage other people, reaching out, even simple stuff, just texting them, calling them, whatever, working out with people who have looked up to him since they were really little, that kind of thing. And I feel like that's really where the majority of the good that he could have done in his life was going to come from. So it's really a tragedy that it got cut short. And I feel like for basketball players, maybe, or athletes, where what you were able to do physically at a certain point, you can't do at an early point in your total lifespan for most people, early 30s, is usually when basketball specifically, you can't jump as high, you're not as quick, and as soon as you lose a step, you're on your way out. And it's kind of sad to watch the people who try to hang on based on their athletic ability over the years, in my opinion. So sports specifically kind of forces you to make that adjustment. But I feel like this is something that's worthwhile considering for everybody, is that switch from how can I make the most of what I have for me to how can I help the greatest number of people. And it doesn't need to take something big like a retirement from your career profession to figure out what's going to be next. You can constantly be looking out on the horizon for stuff like that. I kind of had a miniature version of this just this week. As we record this, I was part of the Sweet Setup. We did a writing webinar, Sean and I, and at the end of the webinar, there was somebody in the chat who was saying that they wanted to get into a writing habit. They felt like they had something to share, but they were discouraged because, who am I to write about this when people have been doing it for a long time and are a lot better than me.
Sure.
And I was able to, basically the webinar was over. We've been going for an hour and a half, and this question comes in right at the end. And I'm like, hey, Sean, you mind if we just hang out here for a couple more minutes? I got to speak to Daniel.
Yeah.
That was the person's name.
Right.
And I shared my story, and I'm like, just keep going. Just keep doing the thing. Don't worry about comparing yourself to somebody else. And they reached out afterwards on Twitter, and they're like, hey, that was me, by the way. And that was really cool to hear you share that. I really appreciate your work. And it was a little bit of a moment for me where I realized that that took a couple of minutes, but it really had an impact in somebody's life. And so my final bit of advice to them was just remember to pay it forward, because you don't know who's going to be looking up to you in the future.
Right.
And I feel like if that's the approach that we had when it came to pursuing our must, especially as creative people, we could do a lot more good than we do. And that's kind of the point she's making with these redwoods. She, obviously, California, redwoods.
Yep.
These trees go up hundreds of feet, but I did not know this. The roots only go down about 10 feet, and then they spread outwards, and they grab onto the roots of other redwood trees. And the result of this is that a single redwood really can't stand on its own, but when you get a bunch of them, they hold each other up. And I thought that was a really cool picture. It inspires me to try to do that more with people that I don't even know, online. If I can encourage somebody to go make their blog, then that's great, because you don't know where that's gonna end up. I've had a couple examples of that, people who have reached out to me when they were going through a rough time, and I always try to be encouraging. And some of them I look at it now and it's like, whoa, you've come a long way. Like, what happened?
Yeah.
Not that I'm looking for them to come back and say, hey, it's all due to Mike Schmitz and his encouraging words, or whatever. But if I have a small part in that, that's ultimately what I do this for. I get joy out of seeing other people succeed.
Yeah, I'm with you there. That's kind of part of my shift. In the last probably year and a half, maybe 2 years of my online creation, it's been geared to pretty high level, and the folks that I would associate with and call close friends and want to have conversations with online were other creators. And it's a shift that probably in the last maybe 3 months or so, I'm trying to get myself to the point where it's okay, if you follow me, I want to get to know you personally on some level. Am I able to do that with absolutely everybody? No. But I would love to try. This is partially why I've been shifting more towards video and webinars and doing the streaming things, because those are all connecting points where we can see and work with each other, converse with each other back and forth in real time, as opposed to you send me an email and I might get back to you in a week or 2 weeks. It takes forever to do that via email or even Twitter in some cases. So that's partially why I'm trying to make that shift, because some of the big creators that I like to follow do that. That's a lot of what they do. And at the same time, I love helping people solve problems, and my brain is really well geared for that. So I want to use that, and I love doing that. So if I have a must, to use that term, that's probably where it fits, but I feel like that's also a thing I should do too. So I don't know. I'm going to get down that road again. Okay, I need to be done with all this. I totally get the redwoods thing. I thought you were going to stop whenever you said, I really want to be like that. I think you're going to grow hundreds of feet tall.
No,
okay.
no, I'm not.
I feel like you're going to be stuck at maybe a little less than 6.
Yep. That is true.
So anyway, that I don't have any other thing I'll rant about on this particular book. So whenever you're ready to do action items and style, you just tell me.
All right. Last thing I'll add here, it's a quote I wrote down, not from her, but from Howard Thurman. It says, "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do it, because what the world needs is people who come alive." I think I agree with that statement, and that is why I am not so firmly in the play it safe camp, for lack of a better term, where I would, if I had to give people counsel, shift a little bit more towards like, hey, go try the thing because you don't know what it's going to end up as. Because I've seen people, and I've been there myself, I think, where you're just going through the motions and it is just a job and it is miserable, and you're not going to help anybody while you are miserable. So do something that makes you come alive. She would define that as your must. Find something that brings you life, that brings you joy, that you can use to help pull other people up. That, for me, is the big key there. I'm not going to inspire anybody until I view the work that I'm doing as a calling. And at that point, I don't have to look for them. They're going to come to me, right? Because it's like, what's different about that guy? Oh, he looks like he's having fun.
Let's go get to know him. He's having fun.
Right. Oh, the other thing here is that the must feels inherently selfish, but choosing it inspires others to do so too. 100%. That's kind of like what we've been talking about here. I could view everything that I do as, this is just something I have to do. And when you frame it that way, there's a temptation to frame it that way as you talk about your must. And it's like, well, aren't you Mr. Fancy Pants, where you have to podcast and you have to create videos? Like, it's almost like an elitist sort of thing.
Right.
Like, you're really privileged that that's something that you have to do, because meanwhile, I'm trying to put bread on the table for my family, working 3 jobs, So you can feel bad about that sometimes, but feeling bad about things doesn't do anybody any good. So I'm still wrestling with how to reconcile this a little bit. I recognize that I do have a bit of a privileged situation, but the challenge for me is to use whatever privilege I have to help benefit other people.
Sure.
Not to apologize for what I have, but to use it not in a selfish way.
Well said, sir.
All right.
You have action items?
I do have action items. Do you have action items? I don't have anything on the list. Okay.
I was too frustrated by this one.
Well, I made you make a list of shoulds, so you have at least one action item that we did. Yeah, that was one of mine.
I had one and it's done.
It's done, yep. She also talks about kind of knowing yourself at one point, and the Enneagram. Is that how you say that?
Enneagram? That's how I would say it.
I don't know. I've heard a lot of people talk about this, and I took the assessment at one point, but I forgot the results. So I want to take it again. In my opinion, this could easily have been like, take the Colby, take the Strengths Finder, whatever. We've done that sort of thing too. Get to know yourself, how you're wired. But the Enneagram is the one that she mentioned in this book that I want to revisit. So I will take that and share my results next time.
Cool.
All right, now style and rating. I know I'm supposed to go first, but I want you to go first.
No, you have to go first.
I don't want to influence your feelings. I feel like we need the Joe rating.
You won't.
And then
I already have my rating.
Okay.
I even wrote it down if you want me to pull it out and prove it. This one, I told my wife, I was like, I need to like read this one and sit on it, because I started off so poorly with it that I was like, I need to make sure I understand what I think about this one, and I'm gonna put together my rating before I talk with Mike. So I have what I think.
All right, fair enough.
So you're not gonna influence it, but it's your book, so I want you to go first.
I'll go first then. I really like this book. Like I said, it's very different than a lot of the stuff that we read. It is not a prescriptive type book. The value in this book, like I mentioned at the beginning, is in the questions that it makes you ask. Having done some of these exercises, I think that there's a lot of value in them. Not every single one, like the empty chair exercise. I'm not doing that one. Some of this stuff, it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. But even if you did a couple of these things, I feel like you're going to get a lot more clarity about your situation and the difference between the should and the must. It sounds like going through this, I have a little bit different interpretation of those two terms than you did, which was a little bit interesting to me as we record this. But I feel like after I went through it, it brought a lot of clarity. And basically the big takeaway for me was you've assumed a lot of things. Some of them people have put on you, or you've just given into some of these things that people have said that you should do. So reconsider them. And like I said, I kind of do that with the personal retreat. So the big takeaway for me not was a bunch less things that I have ascribed to as musts, but almost like a greater conviction to keep doing the ones that I have listed. And I think even that is beneficial. So I probably got not at all what Ellie Luna would envision for people who go through this book out of it, but I think it is a very worthwhile read. I think it is not a lot of effort to go through it, and it is a very unique, interesting visual style where, maybe you get this one from the library if you can find it instead of buying it yourself, because maybe it isn't your jam, but it is kind of cool to go through it. It reminds me kind of like of an Austin Kleon type book where there's a lot of visual stuff in here, although this is full color and not black and white like a lot of the Austin Kleon stuff.
Sure.
I don't think that there is anything in here that I had not heard before that was like transformational. Oh my gosh, I never thought of it this way. Although everything that she shared in here, I feel like was a unique perspective. So it was stuff that I had heard presented a different way, which to me was very refreshing. And so if you want a productivity book that is not a productivity book, if you want something that tackles the big picture, clarity, vision, purpose stuff in an entertaining, engaging way, I would recommend this book. If you are solid where, nope, I have my life theme and I don't even want to think about this stuff anymore because I've already answered it in my head, like, you're not going to get anything out of it though. So I do think a big part of this is right thing at the right time. That being said, if you're looking for something in this vein, this is a good one in my opinion. So I'm going to rate this at 4 stars. I really don't have anything negative to say about it. I didn't have the reaction to the story at the beginning like you did. I understand that reaction, I think, but it also doesn't really diminish the message, in my opinion. I can see an argument for that, though. Like, if you can't trust the messenger, can you really trust the message? But that being said, she's not telling me anything that I've not heard before. So the value in me is just being reminded of some of these things, thinking about these things a little bit different way, and having a fun time reading a very visual book in the process.
Well done, sir. So when I finished the first 30 pages, that part that I was reading to my wife, and she made me stop. I set the book down. I said, this might be our first 1.0 rating on Bookworm. And I wrote that down in a journal. It's like, I think I just started the first 1.0 book for Bookworm. And as I continue reading it, I do not follow her. Like, this has been very clear as we've been recording this. Like, I don't follow her on this. And I have a hard time trusting a lot of what she's saying because of the incongruencies with what she's saying. Like, from the beginning and the end, like, they tend to conflict in my head. Maybe they don't. I could see where there's some value in it. I think that there's, like, the questions and the process that she takes you through. I think there's value in that. And asking those questions can be helpful. It prompted me to stop and think it through in more detail. Obviously, it made me want to finish the book so that I could process my thoughts on it. I haven't had a book actually prompt me to do that in a long time. Like, it's been a while since I want to finish this because I need to think through this one, because there's so many times we finish a book and it's like, yep, I know exactly what I think about it immediately. This was not that way. I had gut reactions to it, of course, which you've heard a lot of here today. I've tried to reiterate those, but I don't think that this is one I will recommend at all, unless you're in a spot where you have that surplus we were talking about, if I can get a read on you and I think that you are in that spot and you are struggling as far as what you should be doing, as far as like where is your calling and what is that must, I used the word should. I shouldn't have. See, this is a problem, Mike. What is it that you must do, to use her terminology? If you're trying to figure out what that is, I feel like this is a book that could really help you in doing that, simply because it has those questions. But if I recommend it to you, I'm going to throw the caveat on it saying that when you go through this, pay attention to the questions and use that as an exercise to go through this. If you're just reading this because you think it would be an interesting read, I'm probably not going to send this to you. I'm going to send you something else. I don't know what it would be, but I would send you something else. Like the Infinite Game, maybe. Like, this is definitely not one I think I am going to put on people. And some of that's because I don't follow her should versus must concept. You've heard me argue on that one. I don't know how many times. That could just be because I'm in absolutely the wrong place for this book right now. If we come back to this in 2 years, maybe I'm in a completely different spot and I love this thing. That's very possible. I could see how if you had made that leap, like what you were talking about, Mike, with your job situation with being let go, and it worked out great, and it ended up putting you in a spot where you learned everything you needed to, and it put you into a position where you were golden and you loved what you're doing now. Like, yeah, I could see how you would, like, this could definitely be right up your alley. If you've gone through things the way I have, where you made that leap and it didn't work out, you're going to be a lot more of a skeptic on this, I think. So I think having that experience tainted my view of this. It's interesting to me that Sean Blanc is recommending this one. But again, that's probably because of my background. See, this is how you know I'm not going to just let what other people tell me I should think on this dictate what I actually think on this. So there you go. I'm going to put this at 2.0. This might be the lowest I've ever rated one. I don't think I've gone down that far in the past. And it's primarily because I don't follow her on this, and I feel like there's not enough clarity. And she didn't sell me at the beginning, which meant I was a skeptic the whole time.
Sure. And
to me, that discounted the entire book. So I struggled with it a lot, but we've obviously covered that today.
Yeah.
So I'll be done now.
It's interesting to me because you mentioned you were reading it out loud to your wife.
Yeah.
And I would make the argument here in terms of style and rating that this book is not a message in a bottle. It's definitely not something you should listen to.
Yeah,
it is
true.
A work of art by an artist.
Yeah.
And if you miss the pictures and the visual style, you are missing the real message that she's communicating. Sure. And I guess the visual style was enough to hook me at the beginning and get me past the first part, which I didn't really care for either. But then after I got past that, I really, really enjoyed it. So
I was curious to see. I needed to look to see how much visual. Yeah, there's quite a bit of visual in the very beginning. I couldn't remember if there was or not.
Almost every page,
yeah.
She has something visual. Sure. There's not very many back-to-back pages of just text.
Sure.
So,
all right.
We'll put that one on the shelf. What is next?
Up next is my pick, The Motive by Patrick Lencioni. This is Lencioni's latest book. Came out not that many months ago, so I'm excited to go through this one. We've always liked Patrick's books. So, yes, The Motive by Patrick Lencioni.
All right.
What's after that, Mike?
Not sure. The one after that is episode 100, so maybe something a little bit different.
That's right. That's right. We'll have to skip and then go over to you. So yeah. we're gonna. That's the thing. We're gonna do something different for episode 100. We won't actually cover a book, but we haven't fully nailed it down yet. We have thoughts.
Got a couple ideas, which will be fun, I think.
That's right. Yeah, because this one's 98. I hadn't fully connected how close we are to that. So anyway,
I do have another one picked out for after that. I guess if people want to get a jump off of it, this is a recommendation from the club. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. This is a book about negotiation by a former FBI agent.
Nice.
So this one will be interesting.
Yeah. I think you mentioned this already, but Gap books, I have none, of course. Life is Crazy.
Yes, I do have one. And this was a recommendation from one of these live chats as we record these with the Well, I guess previously we did them with the Bookworm Club members, but now it's public. Anybody can join them. So we'll put the link in the show notes. But
Yeah.
Daily Rituals, How Artists Work. It's got this like red cover with these white circles. If you search on Amazon for Daily Rituals, you'll get a whole bunch of stuff just to help you find the right one. This is a whole bunch of like 1 or 2 page descriptions of creative people and their daily routines. There's a picture in here of like a typed note from Benjamin Franklin. Did you know Benjamin Franklin was a time blocker?
I did know that, yeah.
Yeah, so they have a picture in here. I think it's from his autobiography originally, but so there's little things like that kind of help make some of this stuff come alive, but it's really interesting to me to see how different some of these people were, even if they were very similar in what they produced.
Sure. Cool.
All right. So thank you to all of the Bookworm Club premium members who are willing to pay a couple bucks a month to support us. It really means a lot, especially right now when things are uncertain. We know that there's a lot of needs that are competing for any discretionary income that people have. And it kind of blows me away that so many people continue to want to support us in the work that we do. So thank you so much. If you want to join the club, you can do so at club.bookworm.fm. There's a bunch of stuff, discussion on the episodes that we release that you can take part in for free, but there's another section just for the premium club members that have like the links to the book notes, that the MindNote files that I take, the Bookworm FM wallpaper, and little things like that. So you can also tap on the icon if you're listening in Overcast. There's a button at the bottom of the bar where you can tap on that, and then it'll take you straight to the sign up page.
Cool. All right. Well, let's put the Crossroads on the shelf. If you're following along with us, pick up The Motive by Patrick Lencioni, and we'll go through it next time.